My name is Daniel Vance, and I can still picture the smug grin on Julian Croft's face as he thrust that piece of paper toward me in the middle of our open workspace. "We all signed this formal petition to have you removed immediately," he announced with unmistakable pride, his voice echoing across the quiet room. "Your impractical methods are costing this firm money and wasting our valuable time." 30 signatures filled that single sheet of paper. Every analyst, coordinator, and senior manager in our department had signed it, except me. The weight of their collective rejection felt like a heavy block pressing against my chest, as my colleagues pretended to look at their screens while covertly watching my reaction. I took the document with steady hands, scanned each name that I had greeted with coffee and warm smiles for 8 months, nodded once, and handed it back. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break under pressure. Instead, I quietly picked up where I had left off in my customer retention models, the text on my screen blurring slightly as I calculated exactly how I would handle this sudden betrayal. Before I explain the events that followed, I want to ask if you have ever stood in a position where everyone turned against you simply because they lacked the foresight to understand your long-term plans. Because what I am about to share is not merely about office politics. It is about maintaining your composure and standing firm when you know your strategy is correct. 8 months earlier, the executive committee had transferred me from the product development division to lead the struggling analytics team. The division had been underperforming for several years, clinging to obsolete systems, while our competitors raced ahead with modern data frameworks. The workspace was filled with analysts who spent their days manually formatting spreadsheet files instead of building scalable automated data pipelines. When the leadership team announced my transition, I felt eager for the challenge. "We need a completely fresh perspective," Elizabeth Thorne, our chief executive officer, had told me during a private conference. "The analytics division has stagnated, and the old guard is refusing to adapt. You have 12 months to turn the entire division around before we are forced to consider restructuring the department." On my first morning, I arrived early, arranged welcome pastries in the break room, and prepared a detailed presentation outlining my observations and goals. By 9:15, I realized something was seriously wrong. The conference room remained almost empty. The chairs were arranged neatly around the table, but only a few people were present. In my previous role in the product development team, we were accustomed to rapid iterations and creative freedom, which made the rigid and slow-moving environment of the analytics division feel even more challenging. Julian Croft, the senior analyst, who had expected the promotion himself, strolled in 30 minutes late with Owen Miller and 3 other team members. "Forgive our delay," Julian said without making direct eye contact. "We had an impromptu alignment session regarding the Eastland account. This was a critical meeting about our largest client, and I had been deliberately excluded." I kept a calm smile regardless. "That is perfect timing," I replied. "I was just about to present my initial assessment of our department processes." Julian leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defiantly. "We have refined these exact methods over a decade. They represent the standard of the industry." "They represented the industry standard 5 years ago," I corrected gently. "Data science has progressed rapidly since then." The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. Owen Miller, a senior database administrator who had been with the corporation for 15 years, clicked his pen repeatedly. The previous leadership understood our client base and respected our expertise. I displayed a comparison chart on the screen. Our annual client retention rate has dropped by 18% year over year for 3 consecutive years. Meanwhile, our customer acquisition costs have surged by 30%. I paused to let the data speak. Something clearly needs to change. That afternoon, I noticed my nameplate had been removed from my office door. The following morning, my database credentials were mysteriously reset, locking me out of the main server. These were petty, irritating actions, but I refused to waste energy confronting anyone. I focused instead on analyzing our corporate pipeline and building a comprehensive modernization strategy. I sat alone in my office for hours, reviewing historical performance data and looking at client feedback files from the previous 3 years. By the second week of my new role, I identified the core structural issue. The analytics division had relied on quick, temporary fixes that looked impressive in weekly updates but completely failed to address the underlying client issues. They had prioritized short-term performance bonuses over long-term, sustainable client relationships, which had caused our client churn rate to rise. During our fourth team meeting, I introduced my plan in detail. We must prioritize deep data mining over shallow surface reports. This means we will require additional training hours and a temporary slowdown in our delivery cycle to rebuild our systems. Sophia Jennings, one of the few analysts who seemed open to new ideas, raised her hand. Will this temporary shift affect our quarterly performance metrics? Sophia's face showed genuine concern as she asked the question, representing the anxiety of the younger staff members who relied heavily on their monthly bonuses to pay their rent. Initially, it will, I acknowledged. But by quarter 4, we should see significant gains that far outweigh the temporary decline. Julian snorted loudly. So, you want us to sacrifice our performance bonuses for some theoretical future promise? I want us to stop placing temporary bandages on broken processes, I answered. The executive team understands that this transition requires a real investment. After that meeting, quiet whispers followed me down the corridor. Whenever I entered the break room, conversations stopped. Crucial documents I requested were delayed or went missing. I began documenting every interaction, keeping meticulous logs of every email, meeting invitation, and decision. I worked late into the night studying client history and finding trends that the team had ignored. While they resisted my changes publicly, I noticed they began using some of my suggestions in their private reports, taking credit during management reviews. Our first monthly performance review was incredibly tense. Our output metrics had indeed decreased as I had predicted. Julian looked almost triumphant as he presented the negative trend to CFO Henderson. The new managerial approach is clearly failing, he concluded, looking directly at the chief financial officer. I waited for him to finish before displaying my slide. As detailed in my transition plan, we expected a temporary performance decline while rebuilding our core analytics database. However, our early quality indicators show customer engagement is up by 16% where we have deployed the new database. Henderson frowned. We need more than engagement, we need actual revenue. Revenue follows engagement with a 2-month lag, I explained. I have included the predictive models in my detailed report. The following week, I discovered that someone had accessed my local files and altered my presentation slides before the executive review. They had modified key data columns, inflating my revenue projections to make me look incompetent and overly optimistic when the actual figures fell short. It was a calculated attempt to undermine my authority. When I reported this incident to Elizabeth Thorne during our weekly check-in, she sighed and looked at me with sympathy. Office politics are inevitable in a stagnant environment, Daniel, she said. Navigate this landscape carefully and document everything. You were selected for this role because you think differently, but organizational change always faces severe friction. To succeed in this environment, you must remain focused on the actual metrics rather than the noise around you. I took her advice to heart and strengthened my network security protocols. Despite these obstacles, I continued to implement my new database modernization framework. I worked closely with the few team members who remained receptive to my methodology, especially Sophia Jennings. Sophia Jennings had spent 4 years in the department as a junior analyst, constantly outshined by Julian Croft's senior position. She was frustrated by the stagnation and wanted to learn modern data science tools. She frequently stayed late to verify database queries and double-check customer retention algorithms. They are intimidated by your presence, Sophia told me one evening as we reviewed client feedback files in the quiet office. Your approach threatens the legacy methods they have built their entire careers upon. If you succeed, it proves they have been billing clients for obsolete services for years. I am not trying to discredit their history, I said. I simply want our department to survive and succeed. Success represents different things to different people, she replied. For them, success means keeping the status quo where they are considered the expert authority. Your success requires them to admit they have been doing it wrong, which their egos will not permit. I was impressed by her dedication and her quick grasp of relational data structures. She became my primary ally in the department, helping me document our progress and keeping my spirits up when the isolation felt overwhelming. The whispering campaign only intensified as the weeks passed. Twice, I walked into the break room to find Julian and Owen Miller huddled with several analysts, their conversations ending abruptly the moment I entered. Their resistance went beyond cold shoulders and skipped meetings. I noticed subtle discrepancies in our data pipelines. Someone was intentionally running resource-intensive queries during peak hours, causing our client dashboards to crash. I began keeping detailed records, noting the timestamps of these system overloads and matching them against our network logs. I realized they were trying to create a narrative of technical instability under my leadership. I kept these files stored on a secure, encrypted drive that was not connected to the shared company network, ensuring that no one could access or modify my evidence before the proper time. I knew that presenting this data prematurely would only allow them to cover their tracks and find other ways to disrupt my work. I quietly prepared a security report and filed it away for the upcoming quarterly meeting. The network logs showed that these queries were launched from an internal address during our lunch hours, which meant someone was physically present at their desk while the rest of the teams was away. I spent 3 nights analyzing these log files, cross-referencing user access tokens and file modification timestamps to build a clear picture of the interference. It became obvious that this was a coordinated effort to make our database look unstable. I quietly prepared a security report and filed it away for the upcoming quarterly meeting. I made sure to save 3 separate backups of this file in different directory folders, including a copy on my personal device so that it could not be deleted from the system. By the 5th month of my tenure, our analytics division began showing the first signs of real, undeniable improvement. Our client satisfaction scores rose steadily, and the initial retention metrics showed a promising upward curve. Rather than acknowledging these positive indicators, Julian focused his weekly presentations on how our division still lagged behind other departments in raw quarterly numbers. He presented these figures out of context to Henderson, hoping to build support for my removal. I ignored the negativity and focused entirely on the work. I spent my weekends and late nights refining our databases. I even worked through the spring holidays while the rest of the team took time off, implementing the changes step by step in the empty office. During those quiet days, I built a comprehensive case study demonstrating the effectiveness of our new data structure across our 7 largest corporate accounts. The data showed that our new predictive models had prevented several major clients from migrating to competitors. I knew this report would be my shield, but I had no idea how quickly I would need to use it. The morning of the petition arrived like a sudden storm on a clear day. I had arrived at my desk early to prepare for our weekly team meeting. Julian walked in, flanked by Owen Miller and 5 other team members. He carried a single sheet of paper, a look of triumph in his eyes that he did not attempt to hide. "We all signed this petition to have you removed immediately," Julian announced, making sure his voice carried across the open bullpen. "Your methods are costing us money and ruining our department." I scanned the document, noting all 30 signatures. Every single employee in my division had signed except me. When I looked up, many of them refused to meet my gaze, while others watched with quiet satisfaction. "Thank you for sharing your concerns," I said, calmly returning the paper. "I will ensure this is discussed with the executive committee." For the next 4 weeks, I had to work in an office where every colleague had formally requested my dismissal. The isolation was absolute. People would stop talking when I walked down the hall, and my invitations to standard alignment meetings were systematically declined. I ate my lunch alone in my office, focusing entirely on my work. It was a testing period, but I kept my head down, finalizing my comprehensive report for the upcoming quarterly alignment meeting, where all division heads would present their results to the executive committee. However, I did not just sit idle. When Julian altered my presentation slides and corrupted the database and the client demonstration model, he committed a clear breach of fiduciary duty as a senior employee. But his biggest mistake was the petition. When he handed me the list of 30 names, I noticed 3 signatures belonging to remote contractors who were working overseas and could not have signed the document in person. I quietly requested a forensic IT audit and a legal review from our compliance department. The compliance officer, Gary, took the request seriously. Gary was a meticulous investigator who had spent years in corporate compliance and security. He reviewed the detailed database audit logs and confirmed that the digital footprint left by the intruder was entirely unique. He explained that our internal networks track every file access by specific user credentials, which Julian had failed to cover up when he logged into my workstation database during the late-night hours. The compliance officer immediately initiated a formal investigation under our corporate security policies, securing the physical hard drives and network cards as evidence. Our IT security team tracked the database alterations and slide edits. They checked the network logs and traced the MAC addresses of the machines that had accessed my files during off hours. The audit confirmed the unauthorized system logins used to alter my presentation files, tracing the digital signatures directly to Julian's terminal, a clear breach of fiduciary duty and unauthorized computer tampering. Gary printed out a full report of these logins, documenting the exact dates and times when the database had been accessed without my knowledge. More importantly, they examined the digital logs of the Office scanner, where the petition had been compiled. Our legal team confirmed that Julian had manually copied and pasted the signatures of the 3 remote contractors, forging their consent. Our chief legal counsel explained that under California Penal Code, Section 470, forgery is a serious criminal offense. Additionally, presenting a forged petition to influence executive decisions and oust a manager under false pretenses constitutes a material breach of the employee's duty of loyalty, rendering their employment contracts void ab initio due to fraud. Under California law, forging names on a document to induce action from the company is a felony that carries severe penalties. The legal department confirmed that Julian had violated his duty of loyalty to the corporation. By presenting a fraudulent document to the chief executive officer, he had engaged in self-dealing and sabotage, which legally invalidated his employment protections. The legal counsel advised that we had sufficient grounds for immediate termination. Instead of reacting with anger, I compiled the legal memorandum and filed it away, waiting for the quarterly meeting. The night before the conference, I stayed until midnight, checking every figure and data projection. The final numbers told a story that surprised even me. Our early indicators had underestimated the positive impact of our database changes. The new methodology had created exponential growth once we crossed the critical implementation threshold. The morning of the quarterly meeting arrived with a strange calm. I wore a professional dark suit and walked into the executive boardroom. Julian and Owen attended as senior analysts, sitting as far from me as possible, while CFO Henderson prepared to start the session. I sat at the far end of the table, holding my tablet and the legal memorandum, ready to face whatever came. The boardroom filled with division heads and executive officers. CFO Henderson began the presentations. Division after division reported moderate gains, 10% here, 15% there. These were predictable, standard results. Throughout these reviews, I saw Julian watching me with a smug look, clearly anticipating my professional downfall. Finally, Henderson reached our division. The analytics department has been implementing significant database changes. This quarter, he began, his voice neutral. Let us look at the financial results. He displayed our performance metrics on the projection screen. An audible gasp filled the boardroom. Our division had outperformed all other departments by 420%. Customer retention had reached historic highs, while acquisition costs plummeted. The revenue graph showed a sharp upward line, unlike anything the corporation had seen in recent history. Henderson looked genuinely astonished. The other division heads exchanged surprised looks, and some of them began whispering among themselves as they looked at the charts. CFO Henderson adjusted his glasses and leaned closer to the screen, verifying the figures on his own laptop to ensure there was no mistake. The growth was so significant that it made the other division's achievements look minor by comparison. He looked up at me, his eyes wide behind his spectacles. "Daniel, would you explain how your division achieved this?" I walked to the front of the room, presenting my findings on the screen. I explained how our team had transitioned from simple surface reporting to deep data mining, creating automated data models that could predict client churn weeks in advance. CFO Henderson took off his glasses, wiped them slowly with his handkerchief, and put them back on, staring at the screen in silence. 8 months ago, our division struggled with obsolete methodologies and declining client retention. We implemented a complete overhaul focusing on deep data mining, predictive modeling, and client-centered analytics. The initial transition period created temporary performance dips, but as you can see, the long-term benefits have materialized ahead of schedule. The room remained silent as I explained the changes. Julian's expression transformed from smugness to complete disbelief, and then to panic. Owen studied his hands in silence. As I concluded my presentation, CEO Elizabeth Thorne held up the familiar white paper. "Before we move to the next item, I want to address a document that was sent to my office," Elizabeth said, her voice calm but firm. "It is a petition signed by 30 members of the analytics team, demanding the removal of Daniel due to poor performance." She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the room. "Given the results we have just seen, this petition seems highly misguided. More importantly, our compliance department has completed a forensic review of the database issues reported last month. It was discovered that senior analyst Julian Croft accessed Daniel's files without authorization, altering presentation data and corrupting the client model. Additionally, our legal department has verified that 3 signatures on this petition were forged. Forgery is a violation of California Penal Code, Section 470, and sabotaging corporate assets is a severe breach of fiduciary duty." Elizabeth looked directly at Julian, whose face had turned completely pale. "These actions render your employment contract void ab initio due to material fraud. We will not tolerate sabotage or illegal conduct at this firm." Julian sat frozen, unable to speak. Owen looked equally terrified. Elizabeth Thorne's voice was cold as she spoke, and the temperature in the boardroom seemed to drop. The silence was so deep that we could hear the hum of the projector. Julian sat completely still, his eyes wide with fear, while Owen Miller stared down at his notepad as if trying to disappear from the room. I stood silently, maintaining my professional composure. Henderson cleared his throat. "Give us these exceptional results. I propose an immediate budget expansion for the analytics division to further implement Daniel's innovations." The board approved the motion immediately. After the meeting adjourned, Elizabeth asked me to remain behind. "Extraordinary work, Daniel," she said. "I am impressed by your resilience. How do you wish to proceed regarding Julian and the other signers?" I presented the legal memorandum I had drafted. "I do not want to destroy their careers if they are willing to adapt," I explained. "I suggest we withhold criminal charges against Julian on the condition that he accepts a formal demotion and cooperates fully with our transition." Elizabeth studied me for a moment and then nodded in agreement. 3 days later, the executive committee presented me with 3 promotion paths. I could accept an executive vice president role, overseeing multiple divisions, remain in my current position with expanded authority, or establish a new cross-departmental innovation team with full autonomy. I chose to establish the innovation team. The innovation team will allow me to implement transformative frameworks across the entire company, rather than just one division. Elizabeth smiled and approved my proposal the next day. The corporate announcement went out, stating that team members would be personally selected by Daniel based on demonstrated adaptability and capability. That afternoon, Julian Croft knocked on my door, looking humbled and nervous. He apologized for the petition, stating they were concerned about metrics and acted poorly. I studied him and presented the legal memorandum. The legal department has agreed to withhold criminal charges under California Penal Code. Section 470, provided you cooperate fully with the transition and accept a formal demotion. You will remain with the firm, but your seniority is stripped. Julian agreed to the conditions. The innovation team was established in a modern collaborative studio with no private offices or hierarchical desks. The new office was located in a renovated building with large brick walls and high ceilings, providing an open and creative atmosphere that was the opposite of our old office. We spent our first week setting up the desks and writing our core principles on a large whiteboard in the center of the room. Every team member had a voice, and there were no special privileges based on seniority. I evaluated candidates based on objective performance, technical adaptability, and collaboration logs. I sent my first invitation to Sophia Jennings, who accepted within minutes. Over the next 3 weeks, I held individual discussions with every analyst who had signed the petition. To each of them, I offered a choice to join our collaborative team, focusing on capability rather than past history. I extended invitations to 18 of the 30 petition signers. 10 of them accepted, joining Sophia Jennings on the new team. Those who declined, including Owen Miller, watched with growing anxiety as our work began. By our third month, we presented our first major database framework to the executive committee. The potential impact on client retention and revenue growth stunned the board. As we left the boardroom, Julian caught up with me. "I have been thinking about our old division," he said. "Our opposition to your changes was short-sighted. We were comfortable with our old tools, and change threatened our status. Now I see your methods are far superior." Over the following months, our team produced one success after another. Sophia Jennings designed a client prediction algorithm that became the firm's standard, and Alice Boyd created database optimization tools that saved hours of processing time. Even Julian eventually contributed valuable refinements to our structures. Meanwhile, those who had declined my offer saw their careers stagnate. 8 months after the innovation team was established, Owen Miller requested a private meeting. His role in analytics had become very limited, and he wanted to join our team. I encouraged him to apply through the standard human resources portal, explaining that candidates are evaluated on current capability, not history. He completed our training modules and joined the analytics satellite group under Sophia's leadership, a complete reversal of their old roles. Owen Miller worked diligently in his new role, slowly earning the respect of his colleagues. He admitted to me later that working under Sophia Jennings had been a humbling experience, but it had made him a better database analyst. He was grateful that I had given him a chance to learn instead of dismissing him. 3 years after I entered the analytics division, our stock price had doubled and employee satisfaction reached historic highs. I began receiving lucrative offers from outside firms who were eager to replicate our success. None interested me until a venture capital firm proposed a different path. Eleanor Brooks, the managing partner, offered to fund my own company, built around our database methodologies from the ground up. She explained that their venture firm had been tracking our progress for months and was confident in our potential. The opportunity to create a brand new firm designed for innovation was too compelling to ignore. I discussed my plans with Elizabeth Thorne in her office. "I expected this day would come," she said with a sad smile. "You have outgrown us, and you deserve this opportunity." "It is not about outgrowing," I replied. "It is about building something without legacy constraints." I launched my company 9 months later. Sophia joined first, and Alice followed 4 months later. Julian joined 18 months later, after successfully leading the firm's innovation team. 7 years after that humiliating day, when Julian handed me the petition, 17 of the 30 former opponents had joined my new company. Our original firm became our largest client, paying us to manage their database architecture. We focused on building long-term relationships with our clients, ensuring that our systems provided value that lasted. Our reputation for innovation grew rapidly, and we soon had more requests for proposals than we could handle. During quarterly meetings in their boardroom, I occasionally caught Julian's eye. We both remembered how differently things would have ended if I had responded with anger instead of strategic patience, or if I had focused on revenge instead of redemption. My revenge was transformation. I turned the people who tried to destroy my career into my most trusted partners. On the 7th anniversary of my company, I looked at the framed petition hanging on my office wall. It was proof that the most difficult professional trials can become catalysts for growth when you refuse to let others dictate your value.